And we are finally here. Holy hell, it took ages to record this video, because every single time that I was about to record the video, that I was like, a certain point into the recording of this video, I would stop myself and be like, wait, I have not done that thing, or I haven't considered this other case scenario or something else. But it's finally here. We finally have a fully properly integrated, or at least properly-ish, there are still some niche things that we need to take into account, component that allows us to export PLY files from TouchDesigner into either TouchDesigner itself or other application, as we're about to see. There's been a lot of support by a few names out there, both inside of the TouchDesigner Discord server or the Alexis one, which I want to thank personally as well. But yeah, it's finally here. It took way too long at this point, and let's give it a look together finally. So we have an empty network as of right now. We will reconstruct your basic most point cloud instancing setup, and then we will start looking into how to make stuff from it. So very simple. We go to subspace, we do add a single point, which is going to be at the center of our 3D scenario, converted from a point to a particle. I usually, at least myself, like to add always a null, which we can call our base instance. It's just the way I'm used to. Then we right click, go to our comps and spawn in a geometry. We might as well already toggle in the instancing setup. And we also want a point sprite material, which we're going to assign as the material of our geo. And just for the case of this tutorial, we're gonna give it a constant point scale of 5. And now let's actually import our lovely point clouds file. So it's going to be point file in, and I am going to select the one I have over here. Actually, I am going to do something better. I'm going to drag and drop it into the network because I already have it over here. There you see it. It already went to my project folder because I set it up inside of the project folder structure, and it automatically assigned the XYZ active channels. And of course, from here we're also gonna want a point file select, and in this ones we are going to choose the red, green, blue and alpha channels of our PLY files. And then for both of them, we're gonna use the best shortcut in all of TouchDesigner, that in case you don't know, it's Alt-N. And we spawn a null for one, and then we spawn a null for the second one. As well, we can simply rename these two to position and color. And we can now assign this respectively as translate OP and color OP. And then we can go to our instancing setup and select A, R, G, and B into our into our instancing translate setup. And the same goes for the coloring, where we will use R, G, B, and A for the R, G, B, and A instancing. For the case of actually demonstrating what the hell we're looking at, instead of creating your usual render subnetwork, we are simply gonna split the viewer over here and go to our geometry viewer. And actually, it seems like I completely forgot that this point cloud was originally saved in different axes because Blender is a very funny software. So I'm actually just gonna go here and switch the Z and the Y channels so that way it stands up right. So obviously this is not the kind of results that we would like to have, and if you worked enough times with point clouds, enough times for me would be anything more than like, I don't know, 5 times, you already know that the way to fix this, it's pretty boring and tedious. For the position workflow, you have to set up a point transform top, and you have to set up, you know, scaling references, and to do scaling reference you gotta add some extra information to it to actually make sense out of that one. And the same goes for coloring, where you first do the normalization from 0 to 255 to 0 to 1, and then, which is something that somehow a copious amount of people just often forgets, you actually have to color correct your point clouds. If you don't do that, your thing is gonna look like crap. I'm sorry, it's just gonna look like crap. There is no amount of level tops or Luma level tops or HSV adjust or whatever other node that is going to save you. You need to do color correction, and the beauty of it is that the color side of things is actually just 2 nodes, for those of you that don't know it, but we'll actually see it by dragging and dropping my newly made component over onto the network. The beauty of this component is that although I absolutely, and I wanna look, I'm gonna put my face here in front of you, I absolutely do not recommend to use this component for real-time scenarios. Make sure that this is a pre-processing step. Genuinely, you are gonna run into issues if you think you can just use this live at any moment, because there are a lot of DATs underneath. There's a lot of conversions being made, not that many, but the ones that are being made are particularly heavy, so just use it for pre-processing. It's not yet ready to be able to sustain real-time type of stuff. So yeah, don't do that to yourself. There's no realistic point into doing that. Anyway, let's go back to our scenario, and we can now send both the positional and the coloring information into our component, and then we can also send it back out, which will allow us to see the preview of what we're actually dealing with. So let's start with the basis. We have 2 sections, one for the actual input side of things and one for the actual output side of things. Everything comes turned off on the input side, whilst on the output side you have this little toggle that is already activated, and your basic file structure that takes into consideration the idea that you're using your project foldering options properly. If you're not doing that, you need to learn about project folders. I'm not here to explain it. Maybe I will do it in another video, because I do have some optimization videos planned ahead, but it is not the main focus of this video, so I will not spend too much time onto that. Now we have our component. We can start actually visualizing and adjusting our point clouds to our needs. So the first thing we can do is go to the position section of our input, and simply align the the point cloud that we have over here. I mean, you might have already realized, but this is a bonsai, so I'm just going to call it a bonsai from now on, onto the word origin. And we can also choose the type of X, Y, and Z alignment corresponding to the center of our 3D environment. So for example, we could go to the x-axis and say, okay, you know, I want my entire point cloud to be perfectly on the right side of the center of the world. We could do the same onto the left side of things, or, you know, again, you're not supposed to use this thing as live as I'm doing it, but you can also set it to top for the Y alignment. You can set it to bottom, so always for the Y alignment, and the same goes on for the Z axis. Then we have size, which is often very much underrated, and we have a proportional scale option. Now, why is it important that we do proportional scaling? The reason is that we want to preserve relationships between each point's positions. So for example, if I don't know, going from one point somewhere over here and another point over here is going to be like 5 units, the second I divide by half the scale of my point cloud, I want that distance now to be obviously 2.5, and so on and so forth for any other division or multiplication or whatever it is that we're dealing in terms of units. It's probably easier if I show you. So as soon as we activate it, we are shown off a new parameter, which is the size by biggest axis. So what does that mean? It means that if you imagine, as it is also specified here in the up sections, by the way, there are up sections for each parameter in the entire component. What you kind of have to imagine is a sort of cube that encompasses the whole point cloud that has a size of 2 by 2 by 2, and the point cloud cannot exceed said size. So yeah, that's all there is to it. So right now this will have a maximum size of 2. But obviously it can be anything else. We could have it at 1, we could have it at, I don't know, 0.5, whatever it is that we want. We don't really have to worry too much about it. We just, type the number and there you go. That's our size. Then finally, my 2 favorite aspects, because these are the most, the aspects that most people just always get wrong every single time. I have to combat with people in either like forums, on communities, on social medias and stuff like that, because no one takes this into consideration. The first transformation obviously is going to be a rearrange or a normalization, in which we bring our color space from values that go from 0 to 255 to 0 to 1, which voila, gives us our colors into inside, at least into the linear color space bounds, but it does not adjust for a linear color space. And that is because, at least from my tests, almost every other major application out there, whether it's Blender, whether it is Unreal Engine, whether it is whatever the hell you want, almost always, at least by default, exports colors in an sRGB color space. But if you read the wiki of TouchDesigner, I believe it is on the wiki, if not on the main website, what they specify about the color space in TouchDesigner, specifically about tobs, is that everything is always done with the idea that whatever you're feeding it is actually bound, or at least adjusted for linear space. But because point clouds usually are not exported into such color space, we are the ones that need to adjust that. And finally, we can just go here and toggle one little button, and boom, there you go. Our bonsai now is color corrected once and for all. We don't have to worry about it anymore. This is, just just the beauty of this tool. So yeah, that's for the input side of things. Our point cloud is now perfectly centered. It has a perfect maximum size of 2 units. It is mapped within a 0 to 1 range in terms of color space, but it is also adjusted in the linear color space from an sRGB initial color space. We can finally then go to our output section, and as I said, by default the output is for TouchDesigner toggle will be on. This is because my idea for this component is that if you have this point cloud that was made, in this case specifically it was made in Blender, then this toggle makes sense to already be on, because you're gonna, as we said, export it for TouchDesigner. And instead, if you have something like a point cloud that was made in TouchDesigner, whether it is a noise, whether it is an instancing setup, whatever it may be, then it will make sense at that point to simply toggle off this thing. And all that is doing, we can check it as well inside of the component, is that operations for the color aspects are actually reversed. They are applied in reverse. So first you go from linear to sRGB, and then you go from 0 to 1 to 0 to 255, but you're also adjusting that 0 to 255 because you're gonna use integers, because other softwares will expect integers, and because not all softwares seem to deal fine with those integers, they are also adjusted with some simple mathematical operation. But let's go actually to the main deal of this video. We have simply expressed over here what the current path of our point cloud will be. We can, this is obviously the full path described in here, which is nothing more than a combination of these three other parameters, which are going to be your file path, which of course spawns with project folders, and then a new subfolder simply called /plys. You can edit this to be whatever you want, but I would obviously recommend you just keep your project folder, because I mean, again, you want to work with your project folders 99% of the times. Then, you know, a custom name, which, you know, by default it starts with my point cloud, and then a numerical value which gets added at the end of it. One thing to notice that you might have just realized is that when you increment the number here, it does not update this value in real time. It does work in the final export of the file, but this is just one of those issues related to my knowledge not still, you know, being quite there to fully understand some of these mechanics that are going underneath, because it was my first time trying to understand a bunch of things that are going inside of the component. But without further ado, let's actually export our point cloud. We're gonna call it you know, number 3, and we're gonna call it like, I don't know, bonsai, I guess. And we can go here again, does not update. We can write the file. This just keeps not updating for some reason. I wonder if, yeah, there's probably something else to it. But I can now go to my plys folder inside of my project folder, and I will finally have my beloved bonsai number 3, which, you know, contains exactly the data that we would normally expect. I'm going to use a point file select, which I'm just going to copy from the one before, to also select red, green, and blue, and alpha. And now if we send this data back over here, it should just, yeah, it should just work almost like a charm. I saw some difference, but I might be in the wrong. I think, yeah, it was simply because of the little discrepancy, but as soon as they're both plugged in, it works just fine. Let's actually do the opposite as well, since we are here, which is to take these two values, which are now, you know, our case scenario in which we have created a instancing or a point file or a point cloud file in TouchDesigner, and exported with the idea that we are gonna use it into some other software that can accept PLY files, so that can read PLY files. So we can simply disconnect these two. Oops, my bad. I should have not disconnected. I should have just overridden the value there. And the way to know it, whether it is working, is that we test again what we have in here. So one thing is not going to be able to be is bonsai-3, because obviously it will just replace our already made PLY within our project folder. So I'm just simply going to rename it number 4. And then I'm gonna keep everything the same, except that now I will remove the output is for TouchDesigner toggle. And as you can see, we have these, you know, awful colors, which make absolutely no sense whatsoever to TouchDesigner, but it does make sense for other softwares out there. So let's write onto the file, which I now have again inside of my project folder. We can bring it here. We can create another point file select, send the data from the bonsai 4 over here. And if we now send the positional and oops, coloring information, big lag spike there. We can then, by using again same values, toggle back on the output is for TouchDesigner. And there you go. It just works. Sorry for the very sharp cut there, but the video was already way too long, so I just decided to cut it short there. So yeah, that was, you know, a little breakdown of the components. I'm sure that some of you who have already enough experience won't find any issues in using it. And for those who actually have a little bit more of experience with point clouds, don't worry, I'm already thinking of all sorts of extra things to add, from the custom channels to normal information to some other stuff. But yeah, you'll see it in the future. But if you have your own suggestions, or if you find any issues or whatever it may be, make sure you comment down below, or you can always reach out to me on Instagram as well. You'll find any necessary link to any, you know, platform of mine or resource that I've mentioned throughout the video in the description. If I have not linked you up with those, then you know, reach out in the comment section and tell me whether I forgot something, and I'll make sure to update you on that for sure. With that being said, hopefully you'll have fun with this tool. If you end up using it, make sure to mention me. I'll gladly repost you on Instagram, TikTok, wherever else it may be. And yeah, I'll see you around. Bye bye.